And welcome to another episode of the PhysioSchool Podcast, your guide to becoming a physiotherapist. As always, today I'm joined with my two co-hosts, Mr. Reed Vandervluten and Mr. Kash Mahdi. Reed, talk to me. How's it going today, man? How are the Alps today?
I'm doing awesome today. I just got back from Lake Louise and a little bit of skiing and snowboarding with a few friends. I wanted to spend a brief second at the beginning of this podcast for a public service announcement and just saying, never hit legs the day before going snowboarding out west here. I've snowboarded for a bit, but new out here, and the mountains are a different beast. So if you are even contemplating it, don't do it, because the DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, I'm thinking is more like POMS, persistent onset muscle soreness, and this week's going to be bad. So outside of that, doing really well. Thanks.
Man, legs mixed in with a bunch of eccentric contractions on those quads. That's tough. That's tough, man. But you're a warrior. You're a warrior for getting through that.
That's what I tell myself.
Kash, how's it going on your end, man?
Good, buddy. I don't have any jokes prepared. Sorry, guys. No jokes on this end. No public announcements here.
Oh, no worries. You're going to be talking a lot on this podcast today. So, everyone, welcome to another episode of Our Path to Physiotherapy. If you've been listening to the past couple episodes, you'd know that we're in this midst of a series where each of us get interviewed by the other two in order to spotlight our individual journeys to becoming physiotherapists. Since Reed and I have already gone, that only leaves Kash to sit on the hot seat today to round out our series. And Reed, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited for this episode today, mainly because, you and I had a pretty similar and pretty traditional route to PT school, which is definitely helpful to get out there to our listeners. However, Kash's story differs drastically from ours, as he didn't take the most traditional route to PT school. So this one's definitely going to help out those people who are maybe going to be taking a similar trajectory to him. So with that being said, let's basically get right into it. So Kash, first question for you today, man.
Sure,
how did you become interested in PT first?
Big Q.
Yeah, so as you said, my trajectory was a little bit different from you guys. I didn't know I wanted to become a PT. I didn't figure that out until right before I applied to PT school. So I've actually thought about this before, like what were the things in my life that led me here? And there were a lot of events that took place, and had one of those been missing or had one of those not taken place, I wouldn't have gone into PT school and I wouldn't have become a physio. So going way, way back to elementary school, junior high, high school, I was a terrible student. I was a 60s student. I spent many years in summer school repeating classes, and it was mostly because I was just unmotivated. I just didn't care about school. No one forcing me to study. My parents were busy. They ran a restaurant, so they were always busy at work. They were at the restaurant. I'd come home, watch TV, and that was it. I was the kid in morning when you come to school, someone says, "Oh, did you finish your assignment? Did you study for the test?" I'd be like, "What? What test? What assignment?" Right? And I'd be like trying to memorize everything right before the test. So that was always me. And I was doing very poor in school all throughout school. And this was all the way until grade 12. Now, in grade 12, I ended up changing schools. So I went to a school called Sir Johnny McDonald in Scarborough, and I switched over to a school called Vanier. And the reason why I switched over, and this will speak to my maturity level at the time, was because I wanted to do co-op at WWE. So WWE, the wrestling company, they have a headquarters in Toronto, and it's just the marketing and the whatever TV deals in Canada. So they do that kind of stuff. But I wanted to do a co-op there because I met someone who did a co-op there, and he said he got free merchandise. So the only reason I switched schools to go to an entirely different school was just so I can do co-op there, because they weren't accepting full year students for co-op. The co-op program at Sir Johnny McDonald was like 2 or 3 times a week you go for co-op. The other days you go into your classes. But at Vanier, the school I went to for grade 12, the one I switched to for this reason, they would do semesters. So you do one semester of co-op or classes, and then you go through your next semester. So it wasn't a full year program the way that Sir John McDonald was. It was semesters. That's how it was set up. So that's the reason why I switched schools. Now, had I not done that, I may not have been a physio later on. And I'll explain why. So then grade 12, I actually never got a placement at WWE. Even after switching placements or switching schools just to get this placement, they never offered me the placement. I never got it. So they told me, oh, we can't do it because he's full year. I switched schools. I'm like, what now? And they still didn't accept me. So I ended up doing a placement at Sony BMG Music. So originally it was Sony Music. And then there was a merger between Sony and BMG Music, and they became Sony BMG Music. And prior to that experience, I thought maybe I want to go into business just because I didn't know what to do. And I guess everyone goes into business. So why don't I do business in university? And I didn't even know if I could get into university. So maybe community college or any path just so that I get my parents off my back. All right, I'm doing something. But that experience with that co-op really changed my mind, because what I saw there in the corporate culture was these people who worked really hard, who were getting passed over for promotions. And I saw this one guy who was super lazy. He was sort of an a-hole, but he schmoozed with the upper management. And when Sony BMG Music merged together, I saw that those people who worked really hard, who did their job and did a great job, got let go. And the dude who was schmoozing with everyone, who was just terrible at his job, he just hung out all day, didn't really do any work. They kept him and gave him a promotion. And after seeing that, that left a bad taste in my mouth. And I'm like, I don't know if I would survive in that kind of environment, or if I want to be in that kind of environment. Another thing was that co-op placement, I didn't really learn a lot. So all they had me do was pack CDs and record videos. I'd just be sitting in a room by myself, recording videos to send off to different TV stations. So I'd be sitting in a room by myself doing the most mundane, boring job. And that really turned me off on, the corporate culture in general. So I didn't want to go into business or pursue it after that. But I didn't completely rule it off, because still, I didn't know what to do. So I still was telling people when they asked me, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? Where do you want to go to university? What do you want to study? I'd say business, because that was my default answer. So grade 12, again, still a terrible student. I took co-op so I can sort of defer going to university. I didn't want to go to university. And one of the big reasons was I wanted to go to WWE, which didn't work out, right? I wanted to do my co-op placement there. But in my second semester there, I met a new group of friends, and that new group of friends, they really cared about their marks. And I think that rubbed off on me as well. So I started to study a little bit. But then my victory lap. So I did a victory lap, meaning that you stay an extra year in high school. So I did grade 12 again. In my victory lap, I had a class with a prof named Mr. Patsalidis. And Mr. Patsalidis was a really tough guy, right? He was a really small guy in stature, but he commanded a lot of respect. He taught at universities during the summer, but during the school year, he was a philosophy teacher. And this guy was really, really intimidating. So he did this group discussion one day in class, and this was early in the semester. And I forget what the question was, but it was like a philosophical dilemma that he posed to the class. And we were supposed to get into groups and discuss it, and then present what we thought on this dilemma. And I remember my group discussed something, and they had a different idea, and what they were discussing and what they wanted to say was very quote unquote politically correct. So I was the one who had to speak up and say what my group's conclusion was. And I said, my group says this, but I think that it should be like this. And the rest of the class and all the other groups also said what would be politically correct. At the end, after every single person presented, Mr. Patsalias got up and he's like, everybody is incorrect except for one person. And then he called me out, and he's like, said how oh, only I was willing to speak out and say something different, and I was correct. And it was something similar to what Jean-Jacques Rousseau or something said. Anyways, he went and told the other teachers in the school about how I'm really smart and how I said this thing and he essentially told the story of what happened. And other teachers started coming up to me and saying, oh, I heard Mr. P was really impressed with you. And that really changed things for me, because he gave me an identity that now I'm supposed to be smart. So being this unmotivated, lazy kid, I flipped a switch and I started studying, actually. So for the first time in my life, I started studying for tests. I started actually handing in my assignments on time, doing my essays. And I kid you not, I was a 60 student my entire life, 60 or lower. And in grade 12, during my victory lap, I jumped up to have an 88% average going into university. So university may not have even been on my radar if it weren't for Mr. P. Now, something else also happened in high school. Another student transferred over for a victory lap from my old school over to my new school. And because I was the only person he knew, we hung out with each other. We also made a new group of friends. But when we were supposed to tick off the different courses or different programs we wanted to apply to in university, he picked kinesiology. I had no idea what kinesiology is. So I had two choices that I already picked. I picked business at Ryerson, business at York. And for my extra one that I had to choose, I had no idea what to choose. And I'm like, hey, what'd you pick? Hey, Jeff, what'd you pick? And he's like, oh, I picked kinesiology. I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh, it's like medicine and like sports and stuff like that. That was his description, right? And based on that, I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And I checked that too, right? And if that didn't happen, I would not have kinesiology checked on one of my programs that I want to apply to, and I may not have been a physiotherapist. So that was another event that took place. So in my second semester, because of Jeff, I took exercise science, and I loved exercise science. I think that parallels both of your stories, right? Everyone takes exercise science in high school, makes them fall in love with the human body, human movement, and that was the same for me. I really love that course. So then when it came to actually choosing a university program, once I got accepted, I went with kin. So I went with kin. Luckily, because of Mr. P, I did pull up my grades and I had an 88 going in, and I ended up going to kin at York University. So fast forward, first year, I'm in university, and now I have other interests, and Mr. P's not around, so I don't care about school again. Okay, so I'm just like getting by. I'm getting 70s, enough to stay in the program, but I'm not really getting great marks. So with those marks, you're probably not going to get into physiotherapy school with how competitive it is. Physiotherapy school wasn't even on my radar at that time. Now, the following year, second year, I start feeling really sick really early in the first semester. So in the first semester, I remember I was just coughing all the time, getting a lot of phlegm up all the time constantly. And I just thought it was a cold, but this cold wasn't going away. Like it just wasn't, I wasn't able to shake it off. I went to the clinic at York University, got some antibiotics for strep throat. A month later, still can't shake this off. So I ended up going to a walk-in clinic because my mom was urging me to go take care of this. So I finally go to a walk-in clinic. I tell the walk-in clinic all this stuff. He sends me off for an x-ray. So he sends me off for an x-ray, and then he gives me a call. I can't really remember because it's been so long now. He gives me a call and he tells me that he needs to talk to me. I'm like, can you just tell me over the phone? He's like, no, come in person. I need to talk to you about something. So if you can come in tomorrow, we can arrange to speak. So I come in the next day. My mom was at work. My parents were both at work. And I go there and he tells me that they found a mass in my chest in the x-ray. And I have no idea what a mass means. So I'm like, what's that? He's like, it's a tumor. And I nervously start laughing. That was my reaction to what he said. So this is just a nervous reflex I have sometimes when I'm supposed to be serious. When people, let's say someone's accusing me of lying or accusing me of doing something I didn't, even though I didn't do it, I usually just crack a smile because I can't help it. That's just the way I am. So I start laughing there. I guess he probably thought that was really weird that he told the kid that he has a tumor. He starts laughing. So I start laughing because it didn't really hit at that time. So he makes an appointment for a specialist for me. But after I leave there, it starts hitting how serious this is. And I'm riding the bus back home. And the entire time I'm just thinking, like, how do I tell my mom this? Right? Like, how do you break that news to your mom? I was 19 at the time. So how do I break the news to my mom that I got this giant tumor in my chest? And it was quite big, apparently. I didn't know how big at the time, but he told me it was a big tumor. So I finally told my mom hours later. I didn't know how to say it. My mom broke down crying. But I continued going to school, and I couldn't sit in class when I was in school because being there maybe 2 minutes in class, I'd have to cough. And when you're coughing and you get that phlegm up, but you have nowhere to spit it, I'd have to leave class. I'd go to the washroom. I'd spend most of the time at school in the washroom. So this wasn't working, stayed at home, and I just maybe show up for an exam or so. But it got to the point where it just kept getting worse and worse. The special appointment was so far away. And I had a neighbor that came over and knew about the situation, and her daughter told us that you should go to the emergency room and just tell them, "Oh, I'm feeling really sick. You should tell them you're feeling really sick, so that they at least do a CT scan, do something, investigate it at the hospital instead of you waiting all this time to see a specialist and then they order imaging for you." So I was really opposed to this. My parents wanted me to act really sick and go to the hospital, but I'm like, there's other people who show up the hospital who need the attention right now, and I don't want to take their place. That was my mindset. So I was really against, quote unquote, faking being sick. I was sick, but I wasn't to the point where I felt like I was going to drop dead immediately or anything like that. But one day it just got really, really bad where I'm like, okay, just take me to the hospital. And that day was on my birthday. So it was on my 20th birthday, I think. So I go to Sunnybrook Hospital. I think it was Sunnybrook that I went to. We tell them what's been going on. We also told them that they found a mass in my chest, and they kept me overnight doing a bunch of different tests. I think I did a CT scan. Maybe they did ultrasound, did a bunch of stuff. And they come speak with me and my mother. My mother was in the room. I allowed them to speak with her as well. And they said that they think I have cancer. So they thought it was either testicular cancer or Hodgkin's lymphoma. And when I heard testicular cancers, I'm like, damn, I don't want to lose my testicles. Like that was what I was thinking. I don't want to, I don't want that to happen. So fast forward, doing more tests, and in order to actually diagnose it, they did other tests. So they did bone marrow. They did what else did they do? They ended up having to do a surgery to get the mass out of my chest because it was really big. So they did a surgery where they broke open my sternum, and that was at Toronto East General. They broke open my sternum, took the tumor out. But in addition to that, they also took out some lymph nodes to test the lymph nodes. And they also opened up my heart and my lungs as well, just to check if the cancer has spread there or if it's even cancer. Is it benign or is it actually cancerous? So they did find out that it was cancerous, and I ended up getting diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 3B because it did spread. So they ended up seeing that it did spread. It ended up spreading to my spleen and very little spot in my spleen and somewhere else. So I got sent back to, actually, first we were supposed to do chemo at Toronto General, but the doctor was really rude, and my mom was like, "We're not having you do chemo here. We're going to go to Sunnybrook." So we ended up going to Sunnybrook, and thank God for that because the care I got at Sunnybrook was amazing. So I had two amazing clinicians working with me. One of them was Dr. Matthew Chung. He was my oncologist, just such an amazing, caring doctor, like the best interaction I've ever had with healthcare practitioners. So Dr. Matthew Chung was amazing, really young doctor, really caring guy. And his nurse, who was my nurse, my oncology nurse, his name was John, but was short for Italian, which was like Giancarlo or something like that. Giancarlo, I think last name might have been Luca. I don't remember what his last name was, but such a great nurse too, like so caring. Everyone at that facility was just amazing. I had such a terrible time with chemo. So every single side effect or reaction you can get, I got just because the chemo was done at such a high dose because they thought I was young and I could tolerate it. And because my cancer was so advanced at that time, they had to really attack it. And they thought they can do it without radiation since I got the surgery to get the major part of my tumor out. So that experience is what really inspired me to get into healthcare. Without that experience, I don't know if I would have later pursued healthcare. So I took that year off, obviously, because of all the medical things going on and how sick I was. I had to drop out of school. So I dropped out of the kin program in my second year and first semester, and I had to deal with cancer. Most of the time I was so sick, there was no way I could have done school, just because like about 12 of the 14 days in my chemo schedule was bi-weekly. 12 of the 14 days, I was completely knocked out, just like all day puking till there was nothing in my stomach. I dropped down to about 108 pounds. So I was stick thin, just very, very thin. I couldn't keep anything down. I was just puking up bile because there was nothing left for me to puke up. So there was no way I could have done school. But that experience I had with Dr. Matthew Chung and Giancarlo really inspired me to get into healthcare. So before that, when I was in first year kin, I didn't really care about school. Second year, I decided I want to get into medicine. And in order to get into medicine, you have to get really high marks. So I had a lighter workload when I did come back, just because I was very fatigued. I didn't know how I would tolerate it. And I just got tired climbing a flight of stairs at that time, just because of how deconditioned I was from being in bed for almost a year, maybe 6 months or more, right? So coming back to school, my focus was to do really well in school. The first semester I came back was a lot of the, I guess, more sciencey courses, your anatomy, your physiology. I don't remember what else, but some of the tougher ones. So I kept my course load a little bit lighter. And another event happened there that really led me towards this direction. So during this time when I was studying for exams, I'd hang out at the CAF or I'd study in the library. And one of these times I ended up going to the extra tutoring sessions, because the extra tutoring sessions had the TAs that can help explain things to you. So I wanted one of my questions answered there. I went there just to get one question that was stuck on my mind answered. So when I go there was a lineup to talk to the TAs. And while standing in the lineup, I remember there was a girl who asked me a question. She's like, "Do you know this one? This is what I'm waiting here to get answered." I'm like, "Oh yeah." I started explaining it. As I started explaining it, a crowd starts gathering around me. And now my crowd of people listening to me talk is bigger than what the TAs had. So I'm explaining all sorts of questions. People are asking this question. I'm answering this one. I'm answering this one. TA session finishes. We go over to, in York, they have a place called Stone College. So there's a bunch of tables down there. We go there and I'm essentially teaching everything before the exam. And there was a few people who probably were on the verge of failing where I saved. And I'm just going to go back for a second because someone else did this for me. So like I said, the year before I wasn't doing too hot, and I maybe did just the beginning of second year before I ended up dropping out. And I wasn't prepared for our first midterm, but there was a guy there. His name is Victor. God bless this guy. This guy is amazing. He helped me and my friend out. He started teaching us and explaining everything to us. And that guy really helped me learn how to learn science and how to learn physiology. So the method in which he taught me was how I started teaching everyone else. And he really helped me understand rather than memorize. So I really understood the material when I started doing this course again. So in teaching people, I actually was learning myself. And all those people who gathered in that crowd later became friends with me. And I would teach them for every single test. So whether it's physiology or biomechanics, whatever it is, I would be essentially running tutoring sessions where we'd get in a group, I'd explain things, and then I'd get them to explain it back to me. And this is how we studied. So that went on, and I was doing great in school. That second year, I think I had a 4.0 GPA just because I wasn't doing anything but studying. Like that, I committed to it. Third year as well, doing really well. Third year, but by fourth year, I was really burned out. Third year I took a heavier caseload talking like a physio here, course load. Fourth year, heavy course as well, but fourth year I was burned out. I was done with it, especially because I started taking some harder physiology courses like advanced cardiovascular physiology, stem cell research, and things like that. And I was really, really getting burned out. And I thought I wanted to go into med school, but I started questioning whether that's what I wanted when I was doing so much studying, because my life revolved a lot around studying. At this time as well, I started to get back into just exercising, normal life. And I used to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Thai boxing beforehand. And I went back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So now when I had this other hobby, school wasn't as big of a focus or wasn't taking up as much of my time as it was before. And now that I had a hobby, I remembered how good it was to do fun stuff. So I'm like, do I really want to go to med school and spend another 4 years studying like this or even more? And then spend even more years in residency until I don't know how long, right? So I started questioning whether that was what I really wanted to do. And I started looking online, reading forums, and there was one that really stuck out to me. And this one forum I remember reading, it was maybe a high school student asking a question to doctors on this forum, asking, are you happy with your decision? Are you happy in your life? And I saw so many responses that were pages long in these posts, pages long, complaining, saying, no one appreciates us. We're overworked. I work 14 hours and I do this 3 days straight. And then I get 2 days off and I'm so tired. All I do, I sleep. I have no life. And it was just complaints and complaints. And this was a theme. Everyone just complaining. But at the end of this page long post of them complaining, they throw in one line saying, but if you really love what you're doing, it's worth it. To me, it didn't sound like they loved what they're doing. It just sounded like they were complaining they hated their lives. So right then and there, I decided, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I want to do that, at least not now, right? So I didn't really want to do med anymore. So I started to take different types of courses. So I started to take some fun courses. So I took like sign language and humanities and stuff like that things that I might have been interested in. Sign language, you can learn a skill, right? I thought that would be fun. That really killed my GPA, which really affected what schools I got into. But anyways, finished school, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was back to square one. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had to get working because I have Persian parents, immigrant parents, who weren't just going to let me sit at home and play video games or do whatever. Really, what I wanted to do is just go do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu all day, twice a day, go training. And maybe I was thinking open up a gym at some point. Maybe that's what I want to do, but I really loved it. So that's what I wanted to do. Parents were not be supportive of that. So they forced me to get a job, essentially. So I'm trying to think, what can you do with a kin degree? Open up the brochure that everyone gets when you're trying to apply to kin. And there's like 100 different jobs there. Oh, you can do this, you can do this. But half of them you need a whole nother degree for. You need to go to med school, or you need to go to physio school or teachers college. And the other half, I'm pretty convinced, aren't even real jobs. They're not even real things. They're just made up words, I think. Like logistical analyst, sports equipment, blah, 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 just like made up stuff. So I'm pretty sure you can't even do half the things that they say you can do with a kin degree. So I started applying to be a kinesiologist at a bunch of different clinics, and I just kept getting rejected. Go for interviews, and they were telling me I don't have any experience. There's other applicants who have more experience. And this went on for a really long time. And this was really, really demoralizing. And I started actually getting very depressed because I spent all day at home doing nothing, getting a lot of pressure from my parents, don't know what I want to do with my life. So I ended up deciding that I'm going to go volunteer to get at least some experience, or at least get out of the house. I think it'll be healthy for me to get out of the house so I'm not home all day just with my own thoughts, getting even more depressed. So I ended up trying to apply to volunteer at different places. One of the places was St. John's Rehab, which is now a part of Sunnybrook's network. And I almost did full-time hours there because I had nothing better to do. I said, I can do whatever you want. And this was more to get out of the house and get experience, not even thinking about physiotherapy at this point. Okay. Physiotherapy is still not on my radar. I've had physiotherapy before, but I didn't think it's what I wanted to do, right? I thought med was what I wanted to do. But anyways, volunteered there, volunteered a bunch of different floors there, volunteered at a clinic. I did a quote unquote internship, but it wasn't paid. It was just a way for them to get free labor. That's another story. So I did that for a while, got some experience, then tried applying again. And I did end up getting a kin job. And really, after a few months of working closely with physiotherapists is when I finally decided, you know what, I actually like this. I think I want to be a physiotherapist. So I decided to apply. Luckily, my GPA was good enough from my earlier courses, really from third year, because fourth year, I really sort of killed my GPA because of that sign language. I ended up getting a B in sign language. It was a full year course that dropped my GPA like about zero point 0.1 GPA points out of 4, which really killed my chance to get into school. But luckily, because of some of the things I did before unknowingly that were the correct things to do to get into physio school, that I ended up getting in on my first try. And I ended up getting in only at Queen's University. I got rejected from the other schools I applied to. But honestly, I didn't know I wanted to go into physio until the last second, really. It wasn't until the last second that I really applied. And I was really nervous about getting rejected from all schools. So I did have backups in place as well, because at that point too, working as a kin, you're not making a lot of money. I'm like, how am I going to live in the future making this little of an income? Yeah, so that is what led me to physio school. But had any of those things not happened, I don't know if I would have ended up going to physiotherapy school or becoming a physiotherapist. I don't know what would have happened. I don't know where life would have led me, but there were a lot of things that took place in order to enable this opportunity for me to get into physio school. Because like I said, terrible school, a student all my life, but things changed. You know, I got inspired by these doctors to get into medicine. Things changed. And then, really depressed, didn't know what I wanted to do in life, just volunteer just to get out of the house. And that really ended up leading me to get into this path. Yeah, long answer, but I think all those things were important for my journey.
Oh, very important. And that's an unreal summary. So thank you for that. I'm sure there's lots of listeners out there that can even, maybe not relate to the whole story. That's very unique to you, but even part of it. So that's amazing. And, the one sort of key theme that kept popping in my head while listening to you talk is just resiliency. I mean, you demonstrated that from going from a 60 student to jumping to an 88% average in your final victory lap year in grade 12. And then your battle and successful fight with cancer. You showed mad amounts of resiliency. And then just even to put the cherry on top, when you get out of school, you've got that degree, you're trying to find that next sort of career path and option for you. You're resilient in your, I guess, quest to find something that you enjoy. And that being PT, which is awesome. And you're talking a little bit about that volunteer experience that really led you to physio and sparked that flame for you. And I was wondering if you could dive a little bit deeper into those PT related experiences, just to give the listeners, that background for you and what helped you get accepted to Queens, like you mentioned.
Sure. Yeah. So the first place I said that I volunteered at was St. John's Rehab. And as I said, I committed almost full-time hours. It was probably like 36 hours a week to St. John's Rehab. And I asked them if I can just try out a bunch of different floors. I really also wanted to see what I liked, right? Be in that environment, shadow, see different departments, see how they work, and see what I like. So they allowed me to volunteer at the cardiovascular rehab department, pulmonary rehab. I also volunteered in the orthopedic department. Uh, I might have spent a little bit of time in neuro, not much, but I spent a lot of time on different floors, and it really gave me a real good perspective of life, seeing what different people had to go through. There was one particular instance I think that really did inspire me to get into physiotherapy, and this was a young guy who got into a motor vehicle accident and had severe burns. So he had severe burns all over his body. And I helped just to push a wheelchair. But I remember one day they got prosthetics for him. So they got prosthetic limbs for him. And he lost his legs as well in this accident and burns everywhere. And he tried on these prosthetics for the first time, and the physios were helping him up and teaching him how to walk for the first time since his accident. And this guy was so happy, and everyone around him was so happy for him And I was so happy for him. I've maybe worked with him a couple of times, but just seeing the profound effect that having the opportunity to do just walk, things that we take for granted every day. I never think about walking, but for him, this was such a big deal. And it really is such a big deal. So imagine yourself in that position and you lose the ability to walk. And now you've regained the ability to walk with these prosthetics. That had a really big impact on me. When I saw that, I'm like, wow, these people are doing great work. By these people, I mean the rehab professionals. So the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, the PTAs and OTAs, the nurses. Like, I think all of these people are such amazing people who go in and day out and help change people's lives. And that is what inspired me to maybe go into physio, right? That was one of the things. I also did apply to OT as well, but that was one thing that had a huge impact on me. And as well, unknowingly, being at St. John's Rehab, I got all those different experiences that, as we've spoken about in past podcasts and as well on our website, how important getting experience in different settings for physiotherapy is for your application. Unknowingly, I did that. I didn't do that knowing that, oh, physio schools like an applicant who has experience in cardiovascular rehab and pulmonary rehab and neuro. I didn't do that knowing any of that stuff. I just did it because I was bored and depressed at home and I needed to get out of the house and I want to try different things out and get experience. And maybe if I got experience, I can get a job, right? Maybe if I got something, and that was the purpose. But unknowingly, I got all this different varying experience where I got to see all different facets of physiotherapy. So that was one of my volunteer experiences. The other one was at a chiro slash physio clinic, a very small clinic in Scarborough. I worked with the chiro as almost a PTA, worked with a physio as a PTA, but I really had no idea what I was doing. I was really just prescribing protocols, like going over exercises with them. They did eventually offer me a job, but they offered me a job at the same time that I had accepted another job when I finally got one as a kin in a clinic in Newmarket. So I drive all the way to Newmarket for the job. I bought a car just for this, uh, a dinky little Suzuki Swift. I love that car though, for like $1,000. Took that, and apparently it was a really unsafe car. I didn't know that until it died, but uh, it was like the wheels were hanging on by a thread apparently. Um, so almost died in that car. But anyways, went all the way to Newmarket every day for this job. And when I was working in that job, um, I was probably doing a lot of physiotherapy things that I shouldn't have been doing, right? And I shouldn't have been doing because either it wasn't in our scope as non-physios, as a kinesiologist, and also just because I wasn't competent to do them. But I did learn a lot from that clinic. I learned a lot because I was thrown in there to treat a lot of people and had almost my own. I really did have my own caseload. I probably saw more people in that clinic than I did as a physio ever in a day. But I learned a lot from that. And that experience and how much I learned really did help me later on in physiotherapy school, because a lot of these things I've seen before. So I can put a picture to it, I can put a person to it, but also how comfortable I was when I went out on placements. So when I went on the clinical internships or rotations you do in physiotherapy school, that made me really comfortable because of that experience and all the experiences really I had in physiotherapy school, or sorry, in prior to physiotherapy school. So yeah, they definitely did help me a lot in order to get into physiotherapy school, but also while I was in physiotherapy school. And as well, some of those experiences were experiences that I didn't get while I was in physiotherapy school. So they helped me in my physio career later as well.
That's awesome. I think that's a great breadth of experiences. And even going back to that burn victim story, I think that's a great representation of, I know us three know the quote about, doctors save lives, but physiotherapists make lives worth living. I think that's a great representation of that,
For sure.
that quote there. And, you witnessed that firsthand. So pretty inspiring stuff there. And I think the other thing that I know you already mentioned, but getting that experience in orthopedics, cardio, pulmonary, and neurological
Mhm.
rehab must have been huge for you prior to getting into PT school. So, given the complexity of your experiences, I know that you mentioned that it did help you in your PT school applications and prepare you for PT school. Can you speak on how exactly it helped you in those two aspects and uh, dive a little bit into that?
Well, to get into PT school, as I mentioned, and we've discussed this at length before, physiotherapy applications do like to, or people who review applications do like to see that you've actually gone out and seen all the different things that physiotherapists do and understand and know the different specialties of physiotherapy and different areas of practice of physiotherapy and different settings that physios work in. And I was exposed to that unknowingly, so I could speak to that on my application. So it definitely did help for my applications. As well, it did help with any interviews I had. So doing the McMaster MMI, because I can relate back to those experiences when I came to respond to any of the questions. So if they had specific questions where I could think of something where I can relate it back to that, that was an experience that I was able to relate back to. Without those experiences, I may have drawn a blank to some of these questions, right? Because I didn't have other experiences apart from my own medical issues that I had. So both in the applications and the interviews, it helped, um, as well going into my clinical placements. A lot of times, I've seen some of these things before in practice. I've worked with patients like this before, so it did give me an advantage in placements compared to a lot of students who go to physiotherapy school straight out of undergrad, who really don't have experience working with patients. So not only did it help with knowledge, but also just being able to interact with patients, having good communication skills, it really did help there. I was very comfortable. I wasn't as nervous as a lot of my classmates would have been, having been their first time being in a clinic. So for me, I had a good comfort level going to clinical placements, and also afterwards going into actual physiotherapy practice. I didn't have some of the experiences that some of my classmates had in the hospital or in different settings, and especially in specialties like cardiovascular rehab that some of my classmates have, just because there's a limited number of placements that you do have. You do have about 5 placements at Queens. So you don't really get the opportunity to see everything in your 5 placements, but I got to see some of that stuff before I went to physiotherapy school. So when I did work in those settings later on, I could draw back to my experience as a volunteer or as a PTA or as a kin. So it really did help afterwards as well. Still
Awesome.
helping because now I'm teaching, and I think back to some of those patients that I had before physiotherapy school. So still helping to this day.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, I definitely want to get into that teaching in a little bit here, but I'm actually going to go a little bit of a different direction with regards to my next question. And which schools did you apply to? Because you mentioned you got into Queens and you had an awesome experience, at least I hope. But then, yeah,
Experience, really.
I'm curious about which ones you applied to as well.
Yeah, so I applied to 3 universities only, and the reason for that was because I didn't have English, and I didn't want to go back to school to get English, and I thought that maybe taking a course in English could drop my GPA. So once I decided to go into physiotherapy school, I started looking into it, seeing how high the GPA was, and knowing how English profs and TAs typically don't mark very generously. They're pretty stringent in giving out the A's. I thought it wasn't a good idea to do that. So I omitted Western because that was a requirement for them, omitted U of A because that was a requirement for them. So I really stuck to 3, which was U of P, Mac, and Queens. So those were the 3 that I applied to. My GPA ended up dropping down with my 4th year courses, dropping down to 3.75. The cutoff for U of T was 3.75. However, they gave me a rejection letter and they gave it very early. And I didn't know that the cutoff was 3.75 and I made it. So it was mistakenly given to me. I called them later, but at that point it was too late. They said it was too late, unfortunately. I didn't hear anything about Queens because obviously if you get it, you're going to get it. You don't hear anything. I heard back from McMaster, who rejected me because their cutoff was 3.76 that year, and I had 3.75. And that 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 sign language course took me, that one alone. If I didn't take that, I would have been 3.85 or something like that. I would have been like 3.86, and it dropped me all the way down. So I went from being a shoo-in to physio school to barely making it to one physio school because of that. But I ended up missing the cutoff for McMaster by 0.01. And that was the school actually that I thought I wanted to go to. So my ranking, if I were to get into them at that time, was Mac was going to be my first choice, UFT was going to be second, and Queens last. Queens was going to be my last choice. Now, I was working at a clinic at that time, and there was a new grad who came who was from Queens. And I told him that I just missed it by 0.01, but I did make it for the OT MMI interview. He's like, oh, you're going down there anyways? My friend went down to the physio MMI, and he didn't make the cutoff, but someone no-showed, and he asked if he can sit in and do the MMI. I'm like, you can do that? He's like, yeah, you can do that. He did it. So I called, they said no, but I showed up anyways. So I show up early before my OT MMI, early first thing in the morning. And when they were setting up, I asked them, like, is there anyone who no-showed this first session? And they're like, we don't do this. Like, I don't know where you heard this from, but we don't do this. And I'm like, my friend did. I only missed, my GPA is 3.75 and your cutoff is 3.76. Is there any way I can just take someone's place who's not going to show up or canceled, or do you have any extra spaces? And this lady I spoke to is like, okay, fine, come at, and she gave me the time, and it was later on. It was later on in the day. So I ended up doing the OT one. This is going on a different path, but I think this is a cool story to let people know that you can will your way to make it happen. So I went super early that day, way ahead of my OT interview. So by this time, when I went to do the OT interview, I wasn't split whether I wanted to do OT or PT anymore. I knew I wanted to do PT and not OT. But I went and gave this interview anyways for a couple of reasons. It was going to be my quote unquote backup plan. But also I thought, okay, if I'm going to get an opportunity to do the PT one, I'll get some practice from the OT one to see what it's like. So I do the OT one, and I kill the OT interview. The MMI, I do so good on it. At least I think I did amazing on it. I thought I did so good on it. So I thought I did really good on it. And I then go to the PT one later that day after lunch, and it's almost the exact same questions. Almost all of them are the exact same questions. However, one of the first questions I get on this MMI for PT was a question I got before, which was something along the lines of like, you're a camp counselor, a child gets left behind because one of the other camp counselors left home early or something like that, and you're the head honcho or the head camp counselor. You're going to go and talk with the other camp counselor who left this kid and went home, and that camp counselor's name is Anthony, right? No coincidence, but his name is Anthony. So what are you going to do? That was the scenario. So when I did it with the OT MMI, all the examiners, or all, I don't know what they call them, evaluators, all of them were super nice and helped ease your nerves and said, oh yeah, don't worry. So when I was into doing the same question with the OT ones, the guy who was doing the evaluation, he's like, okay, I'll be Anthony. What would you say to me? So we did a little role playing thing, and it went really, really well. So when I got this question here, it was one of my first questions this time on the PT one. I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to do the role playing thing because that worked really, really good. So I start off by saying, okay, Anthony, so I understand, and I get stopped right away. And it was this, she was like, I don't know where she was from, but she had Eastern European accent. And she really harshly said, I'm not Anthony. Really hard, I'm not Anthony. And that took me back. I'm like, what I would do is, and I just screwed up the entire thing. And she made me so nervous once she did that, because she was so like strict and stern and was really intimidating that it screwed up my entire day. I left that room with the question in my hand. So I left with the laminated sheet out of that room, and I went to the next station to read it. And I'm like, oh shoot, I have it in my hand. I ran back in the middle of someone else's session. I probably screwed them up too because they didn't have the question on their day. I threw it down on the table, and I ran out of the room. I went to go to my next one, which I was late for. and I didn't have time to read, and I screwed that one up. So the rest of the day, despite having the exact same questions and killing the OT one, I screwed up all the PT ones, and probably the reason why I didn't get into Mac. Also, the GPA wasn't meeting their actual cutoff, so that was probably a reason as well. But just like Anthony, I got the letter from Queens for the bursary, the Goldman Sachs bursary. And the guy who was the new grad at Queens, he's like, oh, everyone who gets this definitely gets into physio school. And some of the other kids that were there who applied to Queens didn't get that, but I did. So I saw that as a good sign, but I was still, because I did get rejected from one already, I was still a little bit nervous. So I had a backup. I had an application ready to go to the UK in the event that I don't get into Canada. But that's the story of the ones I applied to, and I did get into Queens luckily on my first attempt. So I'm really, really thankful. And I did have an amazing experience at Queens. I love Queens.
All you need is one yes, man. It's all you need.
One. And at the end of the day, we're all physios, right? And really, like now I know, especially teaching, which we'll get into later, but teaching students from all the different schools, you know, all the schools in Canada are really good. All the schools in Canada are really good. So it really doesn't matter where you get in as long as you get in. As long as you get in, doesn't really matter where you get in.
Yeah. I've got an additional question. Did that lady that allowed you to take the MMI, did she get fired after you messed up that round and just ran all around?
I have no idea, but thank God for her. Like sometimes, you know, you just got to be a good person. Like there was no harm in letting me do it, right? I came all this way. I'm off by 0.01. If it were me and I were in her situation, I would do it. But as you know, some people are really, really by the book, and that wouldn't fly with someone else. So I'm really happy I spoke to her instead of someone else, because at least I had an opportunity. At least I had a chance. Even though I blew it, even though I blew my chance, at least I had a chance, right?
I think she had a good sleep that night, knowing that she gave you that chance.
I hope so.
Another additional question. How much sign language do you remember?
I know some dirty words. I know how to spell my name. Okay. Kash. My name is Kash. And I know, like, I just know a few things, like thank you. I don't know much. I know how to spell some things, but I forgot so much. Yeah.
So even though it dropped the GPA, it's still, even though it dropped the GPA, it's still a little bit useful to this day.
Honestly, just talking about how things have happened in my life that led me here, I'm very thankful, to be honest, that I got into Queens and nowhere else, because had I gone somewhere else, I would have chosen the other school instead. And the things that later happened in my life wouldn't have happened had I not gone to Queens. And like I said, I had such a great experience at Queens, especially with my clinical placements. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Apart from a couple $1 million, I'd trade it for that. But I wouldn't trade it for another PT school experience.
I think Reed and I can definitely relate to that. So, you know, you got the no from Mac, you got the no from U of T, you got the yes from Queens. What if Queens said no? What would you have done?
I would have been depressed for sure. For sure. I think I would have it would have really hit me hard. I did have a lot of times through that application time and like waiting for the results to come out, where again, I felt a lot of anxiety about what if I don't get in, what am I going to do with my life? There was just a lot of things going on in my life at the time. And I sort of spoke to Reed about this right before we got on air. So during that time, during that whole application time, and during the time when I wasn't working or when I was looking for volunteer experience, my mom had a tumor in her brain. So they found a tumor in her brain, and I'm very, very close with my mom. I should say that I'm a mama's boy. And a mama's boy in the way that I'm very close with my mom, but I do wash and do my dishes and do my own laundry, none of that stuff, but just very close with my mom. So this was really, really tough on me, like when she had the brain tumor, because when you hear brain tumor and we didn't know if it was cancerous, what it is, it's almost sounds like a death sentence. And that's the same thing as well. I should go back to when I had cancer. When I heard cancer before I had cancer, I always assumed it was a death sentence because I never knew anyone who had cancer and I was so young. When I got it, I didn't have a lot of experience with anybody else who had cancer. So I assumed that cancer means that you're going to die, right? So I was like bracing for that. Luckily, Thank God I'm still here, but knock on wood. But when it happened to my mom, that almost hit me harder than when I was diagnosed. Because when it was me, I felt like I had a little bit of control maybe, but when it was my mom and like someone that close to me, that was super duper duper tough for me. That was really hard for me. So I remember in the MMI one, when I was doing the MMI, they did ask me a question about something difficult going on in your life or something like that, where I broke down during it because I was talking about my mom, and that time was a time when we weren't sure what was going on still, but we knew she had a brain tumor. So that was really tough on me, and I broke down when I was saying it. And I think that might have helped my chance actually getting into OT school, because the person became really sympathetic who was in the room with me. She started like almost bawling herself. So that story sort of did, I guess, help her sympathize as like one of the reasons or one thing that motivates me. I don't really remember what it was, what the question was, but that was really tough for me. So even that period of time, not knowing what was going to happen with my mom, I wasn't sure if, even if I got into physio school, if I would have accepted it, because had my mom ended up getting diagnosed with brain cancer, which it was cancerous, it just wasn't an aggressive form of cancer. And had she had limited time on this earth, thank God she's still around and she's doing great right now. I wouldn't have gone to physio school. Like I wouldn't have pursued that. And I don't know what would have happened with life, because afterwards GPA started rising up drastically even further. I don't know if I would have made it without increasing GPA. I don't know if I would have had the will to then go abroad, leave my brother and my dad to go study abroad after, if all that happened. So I really don't know where life would have taken me had I not gone to physio school. And also, had my mom not recovered. So my mom did have brain surgery. It was a very complicated surgery, high risk surgery. But again, great doctors, great surgeons did their magic. Obviously, a difficult recovery, but she went back to work afterwards. She had a very normal life. She still does get a lot of migraines. There is still remnants of a tumor there that is growing at a very, very slow pace right now. That's been monitored for many, many years. Obviously, it's been over 5 years since I've been a physio, and add a couple of years since physio school there. So like 7, 8 years that she's been doing great. But no clue. Like if the physio thing didn't happen for me, no clue what life would have had in store for me. But luckily, all these things did work out. And these are things that at the time, I never told anyone about my problems. I don't really share a lot, but I think it is good to share on this platform. Since that time, since all those things I've been through, cancer myself, my mom having cancer, I've been able to share these stories and these experiences with people I know who are going through very, very similar things. And in all cases, it hasn't worked out as great as it has for myself or for my mother. But I think when you are in that state where you don't know what's going on, it's good to hear these stories where it does work out, so you have some hope. And I do think that sometimes when I do share this with some people, it does give them some hope, because look at me now. Like I'm living a very normal life, and I'm so far removed from cancer now, like so far removed. And it's been like this for a while, where it doesn't even affect me talking about it. I don't get emotional about it. It means nothing to me. It means absolutely nothing to me. Like I can talk about cancer. I can share anything I want. You could talk about it to me, and it doesn't bring around like negative memories for me or anything like that. It feels so distant to me, because now things are so back to normal that even small, irrelevant things in life that shouldn't bother you because there's more important things in life, those things still bother me, right? Which just shows how far back to normal I am now. But back to the question, yeah, who knows? Who knows what life would have had in store had I not gone to physio school and had my mom not recovered the way she did.
Back to the WWE.
Back to the WWE free merch.
Back to trying to get a co-op at WWE so I can get free shit. Oh, I guess we got to put the explicit content on this one now. Yeah, I was warned not to drop the S word, but I did.
I
the
think
slip.
though, throughout everything, I mean, thank goodness you did get that acceptance letter and all of your life experiences led you to becoming a physio. Because I mean,
Yeah.
Anthony and I can both agree the world's a better place when Kash Mahdi is a physiotherapist or
Thank you.
training future physiotherapists. And that's where I had another quick question, and I think we'll wrap up after that. But I wanted to know your working experience since physio school, because I know that you have a unique or a few unique experiences. And then if you can get into your teaching as well, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So I do have a lot of different experiences in physiotherapy, and one of the reasons why is because I get very bored easily in life, and I always want to find the next thing to do or next thing to occupy my time with, which is probably the reason, actually, one of the reasons maybe why I didn't want to pursue med, because in medicine, once you specialize, you can't jump to then being a family doctor to going into being a cardiac physician or being orthopedic surgeon. Like you can't jump around, right? It takes a very long time to get your specialty. And once you're in your specialty, you're in it for life. And I think that's one reason why that didn't appeal to me, because I do get very bored easily and I need to move on to the next thing. And same thing happened in physio, right? But luckily in physio, you can move around to different settings and different areas of practice. So coming out of physio school, I thought I was going to do MSK, private practice, because I really loved my experience in private practice when I was working as a kin, as well when I was going through all my placements. I really had a great experience with a lot of my orthopedic physiotherapy clinic placements. So I went and worked at a clinic where I did one of my placements. It was very different when I was working there versus my placement, because once I started becoming an employee there, at some point, it was a corporate clinic. They started to interject in the way I treat or how many people I'm supposed to see. So there was a lot of pressure from management, the regional manager, and probably higher up, for me to see more people and for me to not discharge people as quickly as I was. So at the time, I was super duper into physio. Like I would go home every night and I'd read research articles. No kidding. Like not even joking with you. I would read actual research articles every weekend. I'd be doing an online course or in-person course. I I actually think I did maybe 50 courses in my first year, just because the way I felt and I approached it, because of my own medical history, was I don't want a patient to come to me thinking that they did their job in terms of seeing a professional, healthcare professional, and me not being able to actually help them because I lack knowledge to be able to help them. So that's the reason why I was trying to look stuff up every night and trying to do all these extra courses, because I didn't want the reason why someone doesn't get better because being a lack of knowledge. And I thought that was very, very important at that time, right? Obviously, now I know there's a lot of things as well that are factors to all this, but at that time, that was my feeling. So I was reading up into a lot of this stuff. And based on the guidelines that I was reading and best practice I was reading, it's best for patients to be able to, treat themselves for a lot of this, not to over care, because that can make them worse, to build self-efficacy, so the belief that they can handle it themselves. So I wasn't booking people as often as the clinic wanted me to. More so, the corporation of this clinic wanted me to, because they wanted me to meet um, certain number of treatments a week for each person, which I wasn't doing. I was seeing them maybe once a week. And when people came with stuff that was non-symptomatic, that was not actually an issue, I discharged them on the first session, because I'm like, this is actually not a problem. This is actually very normal. An example of this was that we were getting a lot of young kids who were getting referrals for scoliosis from a physician nearby, and their scoliosis was very, very, very minor. Like it was a nothing. It was like 3 degrees of scoliosis, things that are completely normal that you would never know. But this physician was x-raying every single one of her young patients, and then you'd obviously predictably see some sort of deviation from normal off anybody you really x-ray, and she was sending them all to physio to correct this. And I'd be telling parents to make them feel at ease that this is very normal. This isn't an issue. I really don't need to do physiotherapy because this is very normal. So your child can go do whatever they want, be a normal kid, go play sports, do whatever they need to do. So I got called into the office, and the regional manager was telling me that, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. It's better. Isn't it better to care for these patients? And then I dropped all this evidence on them. I'm like, actually, the evidence suggests blah, 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 blah. And he didn't like that. And he actually wanted to get me fired. So true story. The next time I came in, I had two students on placement with me during that time. It was like two-on-one with another clinician. Half the day they were with me, half them with the other. So I was with a student that pulled me into the office, and the manager told me that the regional manager said that they want to fire you or move you to fee for service. And the fee that they were giving was garbage. And I told her, I'm like, this is garbage. I'm not going to accept this. If you want, you can let me go, but I'm not going to accept. And that really, really, really left a bad taste in my mouth. Not only with the clinic, but with the profession, with physiotherapy as a whole. So I went from loving physio and loving what I do to really hating physio at that time, because I started to think, like, what's the point of me? Is the point of me just to make money but not actually help people? Because that's not really what I got into this for. I really did get into it with good intentions because of my own experiences. So I got into good intention. So I got really jaded on the whole profession. Now, I also was trying to go to the US to work as a travel physiotherapist. And this is what I was trying to do straight out of physio school. But you have to do an accreditation process. So they have to evaluate your credentials, and you have to first have your diploma. And I wasn't going to get my diploma until November, so I couldn't apply. So I was working at this clinic until then. And it took about a year for my credentials to get evaluated for a couple of reasons. I didn't know anyone who went through this. So I was the first time, and I was the guinea pig for a lot of people, a lot of my classmates. And I gave my creds to be evaluated. And I dropped chemistry in undergrad because it was killing my GPA, and I was doing very bad in it. So I dropped it. And I never took physics. But they didn't accept biomechanics as compensating for that or taking the place of physics. So I had to do chemistry and physics as part of the credit evaluation in order for me to then sit in to write the US national exam. So I ended up doing chemistry and physics, at a university online in the Philippines. And the reason why I did that was because it was cheaper, and also they didn't have proctored exams. I didn't want to, at this time, I was 28, because all the things I went through school, the victory lap, the cancer, the working after school. I was 4 years older than most of my classmates. So I was 28-ish when I graduated. So by this time, I was like 29 probably when all this was going on. So I didn't want to go back to undergrad taking chemistry and physics with a bunch of 18-year-olds. That was my feeling at the time, right? So I wanted to do online. I also was working full time. So I didn't want to, leave here, drive to university, take my class, be the old guy in the class. So I didn't want that, which honestly, there's no problem. Now I don't really care. But at that time, for some reason, I didn't want to do that. But anyways, so I got those courses done. I had to pay extra money because they first denied my application. They wouldn't tell me what I needed beforehand. I had to first give them my money to then get rejected for them to tell me that. Finished it a year later, or a year and a bit later. I finally went to the US after doing my US board licensing exams. So I did that. And I went to Florida first to do my travel PT job. So what travel PT is, you are doing short-term contracts at whatever facility wants you. So they will go to a recruiting agency or a staffing agency, say, hey, we need a physio for this time to this time. Can you help us? The reason why they may need a physio is because this is a busy season. Snowbirds in Florida, they go down. So the population of elderly people is increased, and they need physio, or someone's on a mat leave, or for whatever reason, they need a physio for this short period of time. Generally, the contracts are 13 weeks. But this one in Florida that I ended up getting, my first one was 6 weeks. So the next job I did was at a long-term care home in the US. They call it a SNF, a skilled nursing facility. And this was my first time in this facility or any type of facility like this. And it was also my first US job. US does things very differently. So insurance plays a big role there, and you have to do all these specific paperwork for their insurance, and you have to do reevaluations, and they utilize PTAs a lot more. This was my first job. On my interview, I was promised that, oh yeah, we'll train you, no problem, all this stuff. I show up there, there's no training. They throw me in. I have no idea what I'm doing, but they throw me in there, and I'm shadowing non-PTs. So I'm shadowing OTs. I'm shadowing people who aren't doing my job, and they don't know what my job is. So needless to say, I had a really rough time, and going into work every day, I had a lot of anxiety because I'm going in there every day knowing that I'm going to not know what I'm doing. And that gave me a lot of anxiety. And in the US, it's very money driven. So you need to be productive. What they call productive is you have to be with a patient about 90 something percent of the time. And I don't even know the facility. And I'm spending so much of my time trying to find my way through the hallways to go grab patients. And when I go try to grab a patient, the patient refuses to come. And I'm like, oh, like, what do I do? So I go back and tell them, oh, they refuse. They're like, no, go back there, try to get them. They still refuse. And it was just a whole mess. And it was 6 weeks of hell. It was really hell. And a lot of the people they had me treat were people who weren't fit for physiotherapy. And I didn't know what I was doing there even. So I'd go walk someone who didn't have the mental capacity to understand any instructions I was giving them. And I was supposed to teach them how to transfer, meaning how to like move from one position to other, whether that be from their bed to sitting up. When this person was in a vegetative state, that was what was written in their goals, their PT goals. Impossible as a PT goal. But there was all this stuff that was put in there in order for them to be able to, I guess, bill for more things or to be able to get more money out of some of the residents there, their insurance there, or their Medicare there. So Medicare is like government funding there. So it was very profit driven. And I didn't know that I was being used. And I didn't know that I could speak up and say that I refused to do this at the time until it was really too late. But every day when I went in to do treatments on people who weren't fit for physiotherapy, and I do things just spending and trying to make a whole hour pass with this person, I was just thinking, like, what's the point of me? What am I doing? Like, what am I doing here? What is the point of me? I have no purpose. And that again made me hate the profession again, right? So I really was considering leaving physiotherapy as a whole with all that going on. So I go back to Canada. Throughout this time, I probably skipped some stuff. I did start a prep course company with some friends, but I went back and taught and then worked at the place I did before, but management has switched. And I came back as more of a training role. So my role was more like training the newer grads that came, even though I wasn't very far removed. I was someone that they considered knew something. So I guess they had me train the newer grads, more physio stuff. So I liked that role because I was just really training. I wasn't worried so much. And I knew my time there was temporary. I didn't have to worry about anyone trying to bother me with, oh, your numbers are low or any of that stuff. And then after that, I went and I did another stint in Florida. I was actually supposed to go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but like a month out, the job canceled on me. Luckily, I didn't get rent or get anything. Like I didn't find housing or anything at that time, but they canceled on me. And they did some shady stuff with the staffing company in which they hired behind their back and all that stuff. But that led me then to go to Florida again. Now, when I first went to Florida on my first stint, I met a girl through Bumble. Okay, so I'm like, okay, cool. I'll go back to Florida where she is. So I went to a rural facility, a rural hospital in Arcadia, Florida. So this facility was called DeSoto Memorial Hospital. Now, in a lot of rural settings, there aren't many physiotherapists and there aren't many specialized physiotherapists. So when you work in these rural communities and you go in as a physiotherapist, you are playing many different roles. You do everything. So in this job, there were other physios as well, but all of them did everything, or most of them did everything. So I did some pediatrics. I did some neuro, working with patients who had strokes and TBIs. I did some, vestibular stuff, which was really cool. I really loved doing that. I did orthopedics, obviously. So I spent time in the outpatient wing, and I also would go into the inpatient to treat people. So I'd go to acute care, I'd go to inpatient. So I got to do everything. And this really did reignite my passion for physiotherapy because I was doing physiotherapy the right way. The time I had with patients was a lot because hospitals get really good money from insurance apparently there. So for like a physio session, they will get $400. I'm not getting $400, but they bill insurance that much. So I got to do everything, and that was really cool, and I got to practice the way I thought was best, and I was able to provide good patient care to people. And that really made me realize it's not the profession that's like this, it's the environment. So this is my recommendation to anyone listening to this, anyone who's in a job they hate right now, it's not the job, it's the place you're at. If you go to a different place, there's a chance you can have a different experience. And that's what that was for me. I got to learn a lot while I was there. I got to, have a purpose, which was to actually help people. And I did feel at that time I did help a lot of people. And I got to do a lot of different things, which helped with me managing my boredom and wanting to do different things. So that experience was one of the best experiences of my life. That girl I met on Bumble became my girlfriend, and started getting more serious. So go back to Canada. I took a different job when I came back because I have to leave because I have to keep my residency in Canada because I'm not a US resident I don't have a visa or anything. I just get work visas when I go. So I had to do at least 6 months in Canada. So I took a job at another clinic in Toronto. So it was a higher end clinic this time. I did have the experience and a resume to back it up to get that kind of job. So I worked at this really good clinic. The owners were really great. They just took it over and they let me treat how I wanted. And it was 30-minute appointments for treatments, 1 hour assessments. So very typical. So I wasn't pressured to see many people. I practiced it the way I wanted. I also got paid better than I was. The ironic thing is the place where I had an easier time working and I wasn't as stressed, I got paid better as well. So the crappier job actually overworked me and paid me less, which is quite ironic, right? And to be honest, that's a trend that I see as well with all these physio jobs. The better jobs tend to pay better and be less stressful as well. But I had a great experience there. But the relationship was pretty serious, so I wanted to go back to Florida. And I spent some time there, and I actually took some time off of working as a physio to continue working on these courses that I was developing. So I started to work more on that full time, and things got more serious with this girlfriend who is now my wife. So that stint in Florida ended up turning, and that actually getting that job canceled in Louisiana led me back to Florida, which made that, whatever relationship turn into a serious relationship, which ended up leading to being my wife. So that was another thing that happened, which was out of my control, which led me down this path and put my life to where it is now. But yeah, those are all the different experiences that I gathered. But I haven't worked as a clinician for a while because COVID hit soon after. And when COVID hit, I felt it was best for me not to work with people given my medical history because I do still have some remnants of some medical issues. So as a result of the surgery, not necessarily the cancer, but the surgery I had where they opened up my heart and my lung as well to check if the cancer had spread there was scar tissue left over, and that scar tissue does increase my risk for pericarditis. So I do get pericarditis about once a year. And what pericarditis is, it's inflammation of a layer that's outside of your heart. So you have a layer outside, a fluid-filled layer, double sac-filled layer around your heart like this, and that gets inflamed for whatever reason. But one of the risk factors is scar tissue on your heart, or any sort of traumatic surgery or anything like that. Those are risk factors. So I thought it's best for me not to expose myself to other people during the pandemic. So I stopped working as a clinician. Luckily, what was once my side gig and this thing that I created to help students pass the national exam ended up, growing and growing on its own very organically. And that became a full-time gig. And I was able to focus on that and live off of that. So that's what I do now as well. I'm now doing this with you guys, which is a cool project as well.
That's amazing. That is
talking so much, by the way.
No, that's quite the roller coaster ride through our profession. And I think that speaks to your point earlier about how, if you're somebody who gets bored easily, lower attention span, physio is definitely a career that can help you ameliorate that, because there's so many different places that you can go, so many different patient populations, different settings. It's just like the opportunities are endless. And then even here, like,
and I just hit the tip of the iceberg. Like, I only did this much of what physios can do, right? There's so many different things you can do as a physiotherapist.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's amazing. Reed, any last minute questions for Kash here?
I think I'm good. That was more knowledge than anyone could have asked for, and I'm really grateful that you were sharing it and willing to share it, Kash. So thank you.
No, it's
my pleasure. Yeah. My pleasure.
No, amazing. I just got one last quick question. Any chance we can get Mr. P on the podcast in the future?
Mr. Patsalides, I hope. Yeah, I'd love to reach out to him. Like, I don't know what he's doing right now. He's probably still teaching. The guy loved teaching. He was up there in age, but he's probably still teaching, I bet. Yeah.
Man, he's a key figure in your story. So
honestly, he is. I do want to reach out to him. Maybe after this podcast, I'll look up, I'll Google him, see where he's at, look on Facebook, creep him out, see if I can find him just to thank him.
Yeah, we'll have to run a rate my teacher on him for sure.
For sure.
But no, awesome. Thanks so much, Kash. I don't think I know this episode and your story is definitely going to help out a lot of people. And I know people will be able to use this as inspiration and motivation to eventually get into physio school. So I think this is a great resource going forward. But yeah, anyways, guys, thanks so much for listening to yet another episode of the PhysioSchool Podcast. We really, really appreciate each and every one of you guys listening. So if you do like episodes like this and you want to hear more, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. That would really, really help us to push this podcast to the top and keep putting out the best content for you. And then if you want to reach out to us for anything at all, check us out on our multiple social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. We are on it. Just check our show notes for that. And then lastly, if you need some assistance for your application, we have a course called the PT Application Booster, where we basically set a roadmap for you to help you get the competitive edge with your physio school application. So definitely check out our website for that. And then lastly, coming soon, interviews are on the horizon. So check out our PT Interview Booster course as well if you need some assistance preparing for your interviews for physiotherapy school. Okay. All that's on our website. Check that out. We're happy to help out. All right, guys. So that will be another episode. We will see you at the next episode.